Hello everyone, it's Jonny Khatru, and in this video I'm listening to the new album from Moor Mother, Black Encyclopedia of the Air. I first heard Moor Mother back in 2016 with the album Fetish Bones, which was definitely intriguing to me, but I found it to be pretty impenetrable, not necessarily making its way to my heart, but definitely leaving an impression. After hearing the single After Images, I went into 2019's Analog Fluids of Sonic Black Holes with pretty high hopes. And sure enough, I did find that album to be easier to digest. Although maybe it did feel slightly unfocused to me, like she could make something more complete. And sure enough, that happened the following year, but surprisingly it was in the form of a collaboration. 2020's Brass with Billy Woods was a really big surprise. Its sound was immediately compelling, every track unique and engaging, and her chemistry with Billy was really exciting. Going into another Moor Mother solo album, I expect something more impenetrable, noisier, based on my past experience. But at the last minute, I decided to give this one a go on recommendation from my friend Al. So do me a favor and click the like button on this video and let's get into the album. Track 1, Temporal Control of Light Echoes, opens with the kind of bizarre atmosphere I've come to expect from Moor Mother, with her commanding voice contorting over an abstract soundscape. Of gods. I really like the vocoder effect on some of the vocals here. There's something extra creepy about it in this context. It's a pretty effective introduction track, and like with all her projects, is bizarre and uncompromising. As we continue into track 2, Mangrove, a beat comes in that's actually pretty grounded. I'm really feeling this already. And we get a solid verse from 𝐒𝐻𝐬𝐳, who I first heard on Brass last year. And in fact, the strange yet jazzy beat with its lush fusion samples reminds me quite a bit of Brass, which I'm really pleased about. I just adored the sound of that album last year, so I'm really glad to hear it getting some continuation here. Track 3 is Race Function Limited, and a British rapper named Brother May opens this track. I hadn't heard of him before, but he sounds great here. It's a London accent. I adore the warm synth pad sounds on this track. There's something just really appealing about the sound of this. Love those synth pads. I'm a sucker for that sound. The jazzy chords are cool and sustained, and Moor Mother's vocal delivery is as compelling as ever. The lush sounds continue into track 4, 𝐒𝐻𝐻𝐿, with a really nice verse from a rapper named 𝐿oJai. Or correct me if I'm saying his name wrong. Same as it feel as the music playing. Shining on my day, I let it wash away. And in fact, at this point, I'm really enjoying all the variety that each of the guests on the album brings to each track. Despite the overall music on this track coming off to me as very beautiful, easy to enjoy, the violin that comes in towards the end definitely veers between beauty and discordant discomfort. Moor Mother's poetry is, for me, often quite difficult to get a grasp on, but something I do often notice is that she likes to combine literary depth with more common typical phrases from hip-hop culture. And I think this song, Vera Hall, is a great example of Moor Mother blurring the lines of everyday hip-hop and abstract art, I think. The beat on here is, again, so lush, really jazzy, and pretty hazy in this case. Sounds so good. And the extra vocals, in this case from BFLY, are really beautiful. All the songs so far have been very short, never sticking around longer than they need to, and the next 2 tracks are particularly brief, but so full of ideas, almost giving me a feeling of whiplash. In track 6, Obsidian, the textures continue to be gorgeous. Moor Mother is using a sing rap style that sounds closer to something someone like Drake might do, and yet the context it's used in here makes it feel so original. And the closing feature verse from Pink Sifu works really well too. At this point I realized that this instrumental and some others before remind me quite a bit of micro house artist Jan Jelinek or Farben. You know, it's that kind of super minimal techno kind of sounds that she's using here. You really don't usually hear these kinds of sounds in hip hop albums, so it took me a while to realize that that was what I was hearing. These short tracks are so brief yet packed full of amazing sounds and ideas. The momentum of the album at this point is amazing.
Hide and seek. Get your ass in the house, cover your mouth when you speak.
This is track 7, 𝐒𝐻𝐻, and the glitchy beat here is so cool and mysterious. No drums, but Moor Mother is still rapping with a cool rhythmic flow, keeping the momentum going, but continuing to contort her voice in all kinds of bizarre ways. Rogue Waves has a classic 90s sounding beat with more gorgeous jazz fusion samples on top.
Like spring well, chill in hell, bricks of ice in the wishing well.
Just adore the thick atmosphere of these lush beats. Eerie and yet like somehow quite lush and beautiful as well. It's quite surprising, but this is perhaps the closest that Moor Mother gets to making a classic hip hop track here. Although maybe I would say there's always this kind of separation of irony to what she does.
Water don't get wet like this. You ain't a boss like this. Don't ring alarms like this.
This song is just so strong though, definitely one of my favorites on the album. Track 9 is called Made a Circle, and we get a bit more of that strange yet ambient techno influenced vibe here.
I see us coming out of fear. But when we listen,
this time Moor Mother is backed up by multiple features, and I especially enjoyed the last verse on the track, but I'm not sure who delivered it. Sounds great though.
They built the floor, the ceiling is irrelevant. We want more for the betterment.
Very compelling vocals from all the artists featured here. Track 10 is called Tarot, and this song actually marks a point at which Moor Mother begins to dismantle the structures that she's built up over the album so far.
Your sickness, lay down your worry.
Abstraction takes over, and there's no sign of the rhythms or even the techno vibes that we've heard on the album so far. And even this song itself gets dismantled as it goes on, until the last couple of minutes are just a collage of natural sound effects, vocalizations by guest Yata, the song ending with only Moor Mother's voice and the sound of water. I feel like the momentum of the album has come to a bit of a halt with this track though. After all the momentum of constant new ideas and rhythms, this 6-minute track of stripped back ambience is quite surprising. But it's a pretty compelling soundscape, and it actually works really well in its position in the album. Track 11, Nighthawk of Time, wakes you up with some abrasive percussion samples, but the abstraction continues. No beat is laid down, and some of those strange vocoder sounds from the intro of the album return here. It's a very uneasy atmosphere, but after how lush and beautiful so much of the album was at this point, this intense strangeness works really well. Wow, this is absolutely bizarre. Track 12, 𝐒𝐻𝐻, is really noisy in a way that's perhaps more reminiscent of Moor Mother's earlier work. Fucking hell.
That's a dead clock. This kind of people's time.
These last 3 tracks on the album all have really prominent mentions of clocks and time, and mixing that with the increasingly bizarre soundscapes of each track, it's a pretty fascinating way to bring the album to a close. I think it gives the album a kind of narrative sweep that I really enjoy.
So fucking slow.
The last track, called Clock Fight, leaves us in the state of abstraction we've been stuck in for a while now.
City clock, the country clock, and I ain't gotta fight no more.
We'll never return to anything like the tight jazz rap sound last heard on Made a Circle. No, the album just intentionally leaves you feeling pretty disorientated. This album is a really compelling journey, beginning in abstraction, taking us through a whole world of jazz and techno-influenced hip-hop, before tearing it all apart in the last few tracks, leaving us floating in Moor Mother's dark, intangible world. I went into this album expecting Moor Mother to have returned to her generally more impenetrable sounds that I'd heard on her previous solo albums, but this album is more of a continuation of last year's Brass than I expected and probably most people would expect, which came as a really great surprise to me because I was a huge fan of Brass. It was one of my favorite albums of last year. And you know, I nearly gave this album a miss, and I'm really glad I didn't because it's a really great album. So I'm very, very happy to have received this follow-up to Brass that I think even expands on that sound in some ways, this time with Moor Mother of course taking the reins of the sound entirely by herself. And I think most impressive of all, I found this album really easy to listen to. I can just slip right into it, fully engages me. I'm just so into it for the whole duration of the album, despite the continued subversion of conventions that Moor Mother is becoming very well known for. So yeah, a very creative album, very strange, but if you haven't heard it, I do recommend you check it out because, like I say, it's just surprisingly accessible for something so unusual. So I streamed my first listen to this album over on Twitch. If you want to join me for more full album streams, go follow me over on Twitch at twitch.tv/JonnyKhatru. It'll be great to see you there. And if you've enjoyed this video, please consider supporting me with the link in the description to buy me a coffee. It helps me to be able to keep my channel going, keep making these videos, so I'll really appreciate it. And thank you very much for watching. Until next time, take it easy.